Hello everypony, Prince Alagorna back again, and now that I've got all of that rage out of me, let's try to end Nightmare Tonight on a little bit more of a positive note, shall we? So, this one was originally scheduled to only be 10 pastas long, but I couldn't stop there. So, here's my top 20 most underrated creepypastas. These are the stories that I think don't get discussed enough and are really, really good and deserve a lot more attention. So let's jump right in. Number 20, The Diary of Mr. Well Done. What exactly is Mr. Well Done? We don't really learn in this pasta, but we do get glimpses into his thought process, and it's joyously maniacal. A seemingly immortal being, Mr. Well Done is here to tell us why humanity both sickens and fascinates him, while giving us explicit instructions on how to see the creatures that lurk in the darkness, and hopefully transcend our mundanity in the process. This one isn't quite as fun as just words on paper. This one is best experienced read aloud. Number 19, Lost Episodes. Ah, the wonder that is Slime Beast. Up there with Matt Dominski and Michael Whitehouse, Slime Beast is one of the few pasta writers that really is professional grade. This one is maybe the most unique take on a Lost Episode pasta ever, chronicling the life of an autistic boy named Sid, who had an artistic flair for cutting videotape through the eyes of his friend. After losing touch with Sid for years, the friend returns home and visits Sid's house, and what he finds is something straight out of Tetsuo the Iron Man. This one will floor you. Number 18, The Disappearance of Ashley, Kansas. Something about this tale of a small Kansas town swallowed up by a mysterious earthquake in the 1950s feels very real to me. I can't explain why, but it just does. Give it a read. It's pretty fanciful, but the events are so well described that maybe you just might believe it too. Number 17, Self-Preservation. This one just hurts me. What would you do if you were infected with an alien illness with only one way to alleviate the pain? This unique take on the outbreak story just asks that question. This isn't your typical zombie story. Everyone involved is still cognizant of what they're doing, which makes things all the more disturbing. Number 16, Girl in the Photograph. A little boy discovers a photo in the lawn of his schoolhouse of a beautiful little girl giving a peace sign. Instantly falling in love, he asks everyone he knows if they know her. No one does. But one night, the boy hears a tapping on his window, then giggling. He sneaks out, following the giggling, to unfortunately run out into the street and die. The driver gets out to try to help and sees the boy clutching a picture. He looks at it to see a beautiful little girl holding up 3 fingers. This one is a great example of how to tell a lot in very little. Less than a page long, this story still packs a mighty wallop in the end. Beautifully executed. I found at number 15, I found A Dead Girl's Diary. Ah, the story Play With Me wants to be. In this story, a teen girl who was the acquaintance of a lonely, depressed, shy, and private classmate receives her diary when she goes missing. When she digs deeper into the mystery, the spirit of the deceased girl starts exerting greater influence on her. Eventually, she learns the girl was gang raped and killed by all the boys she was sleeping around with. When confronted, they claim the dead girl was a witch of some sort, using some kind of mind control on them, and they had to kill her to break free. Eventually, they start dying one by one, until only the protagonist and the leader of the boys are left. During the final showdown, the dead girl assumes full control of the protagonist and finally exacts her revenge, before departing into eternal slumber. And that, my friends, is how you do a ghost story. The ghost herself is a little morally ambiguous. Is she a witch, or were the boys just trying to rationalize why they would all fall enough in love with the lonely fat girl to become violently hateful when her infidelity was exposed? The story leaves it open to interpretation. But for what happened to her, it almost doesn't matter. She certainly has a great claim to her pound of flesh, and boy does she get it. It wraps up with a satisfying conclusion where things are finally made right in the world, and that's the end. No supernatural serial killer bullshit, Kiki. The ghost finishes its earthly business and departs for whatever heaven or hell awaits it, as it should be. Number 14, Baboon Lane. This one plays tricks on you. The author recounts an experience from his childhood where he and a companion explored a creepy lab just outside of town that did experiments on baboons, including experiments that raised their intelligence. You think it's going one direction, towards a Rise of the Planet of the Apes conclusion, but the swerve at the end that reveals what these baboons really are not only levels expectations, but delivers a glimpse into the darker history of certain sets of social relations in American history. A nice, subtle story that leaves you completely wrecked with that twist ending, dealing with some very heavy themes in a very clever way. If only all creepypastas were this smart. Number 13, The Melancholy of Herbert Solomon. Distrust is a powerful thing. It can lead us to make assumptions before we have the facts. Assumptions that can make us do horrible things. This story is just such a tale. This one has the ability to pull at the heartstrings, which I love. Melancholy is a good word for it. It's more sad than scary, with a specter whose backstory is absolutely tragic. But it will surprisingly make you feel good at the end. Well worth checking out. Number 12. Return to Oz. Memories are a powerful thing. Fantasies and realities can become very blurry when we look into the past. Does what we remember about the media we consumed really stem from the events in the work itself, or are they influenced by connections our mind makes to things that really happen to us? Things that maybe, on their own, we really don't want to remember. That's what this story is about, as it relates one person's experiences with the movie Return to Oz. Throughout the story, we know the protagonist knows something is wrong, that they keep remembering things in the movie that aren't there, even with the more decidedly creepy and disturbing tone the film takes to the classic Wizard of Oz. And the author is right in that respect. Return to Oz is surprisingly dark and twisted when you get right down to it. But even then, when everything falls into place for the ending, there's no way to truly prepare yourself for it. This one is truly an out-of-nowhere twist that when you actually look back at it, it makes a lot of sense. Very Sherlock Holmes-esque, where you're not going to see the evidence at first, but after the second or third reading, you'll see that everything was there all along. You just weren't paying enough attention to it. Very clever. Number 11. I told you to smile. We all have that fear of the monster under our bed. Most of us grow out of it. Repeated checking, a growing sense of confidence, and a decreasing fear of dark or confined spaces conspire to eradicate that paranoia. But what if? What if someone or something really was there? What if you videotaped it? What if you saw it? Only to realize it's still there. Sweet dreams, kids. Number 10, Vivictus. The longest entry on this list, at 30 pages long, This one is a monster that will take you some time to get through. But it's worth it, given the unique subject matter. It relates the journal entries of a young soldier in Iraq and the mysterious events plaguing her and her unit. One would think that there would be a wealth of creepypastas about the war. War is a terrible thing that does terrible things to people and forces them to witness terrible things. It's maddening, chaotic, and traumatizing. Add in a strange occurrence and an odd situation, and a story like this should be easy to write, right? But yet, not many people have taken up the challenge. Maybe it's for fear of disrespecting actual veterans and survivors? If so, I certainly understand that. But still, I would expect more stories like this. As it stands now, this is a fine story that tackles things pretty well. Number 9. The Cough. You knew an MLP story was going to make this list. You just knew it. I could have put Simple Theory's My Little Pony on here, as that's a great theory pasta, but I voted for The Cough. This one doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. It's another short pasta that packs a lot of punch. It's another unique take on the Outbreak story, and it's got another masterfully done twist ending. Seriously, check this one out. Number 8. Fallout, Diary of a Dead Man, Fallout 2, Secret Ending, and Fallout New Vegas, Lone Wolf Radio. This may be cheating, but all 3 of these Fallout pastas are amazing, and each overshadowed by Fallout 3, The Number Station. Diary of a Dead Man is just that, the diary of a survivor of the Day of Fire. It details his final days in the immediate aftermath of the apocalypse. A worker that ends up buried under his workplace when the bombs level it, he's forced to listen to his co-workers dying, the moans of the walking wounded outside, and finally the National Guard being forced to kill desperate survivors just to not be overrun and possibly killed themselves. It's a harrowing story of a world gone to hell in a handbasket. Seriously depressing stuff. Fallout 2 Secret Ending is an interesting gaming pasta about what happens if you beat Fallout 2 while making every single immoral choice you can make in the game. Allegedly, if you do that, at the end of the game you return to your vault. You can't exit again, so you have to look around. As you do, you will find it populated. If you look hard enough though, you'll see that it's populated by every single character that you have killed, mugged, or otherwise fucked over. Once you reach the end of the vault, you'll find the Vault Dweller there, waiting for you, looking forlorn. He'll convey his disappointment in you. He'll tell you how he didn't return hope to the wasteland and help get things on the path to recovery they're on now, only to see his successor become a monster. And then the game will crash. It loses credibility with the warning not to turn on your TV for several hours after you get the secret ending, because it will only be static, and the implication that the static may follow you even if you don't play with the TV. Because apparently now secret endings to PC games can fucking do that. But beyond that, this is surprisingly plausible. And Lone Wolf Radio is in fact real. I believe in my bones that this isn't just a story. Because Lone Wolf Radio, basically Lone Wolf Radio is a theory to explain that weird camper you find in the desert in New Vegas that's clearly someone's radio setup. Allegedly, there was going to be a mission attached to it. Lone Wolf, the DJ, was supposed to be a crazy man running a broadcast during the day where he just played some music, but mostly just ranted about things. After a certain time, the station would go dark. A few hours later, Lone Wolf would come back on air with a young child and kill them during the broadcast. Once you figured out this was happening, a mission was supposed to initiate in which you hunt down and kill Lone Wolf. It was scrapped because it became too cost prohibitive and memory taxing to record a different death for every night. But somewhere in Obsidian's vaults, they still have the recordings that were made before the project was scrapped. Dozens of simulated child murders, just sitting there, waiting to be heard. Like I said, I don't think this one's fake. The fact that Lone Wolf's setup exists in the game convinces me that they wanted to do something with it. And while the Fallout universe isn't without its humor and levity, this is the story of an America wiped out by nuclear holocaust, and the hard lives of those left to carry on and rebuild what's left to rebuild. It's a grim world, and a mission like this would not feel out of place in it. Number 7, Persuaded. This one is very similar to Self-Preservation, but not quite the same story. An outbreak has started to change people into flesh-eating monsters. The protagonist has holed himself up in his bathroom with enough supplies to last a few days and locked the door. The infected break through, and the protagonist is faced with one unsettling fact. They're smart. They talk. And they start trying to gently coax our protagonist to just let them in. How long can the protagonist last? How persistent are our villains? Number 6, Liars. The story Jeff the Killer and all of his ilk wishes it was. So, a boy known for his blunt jokes and brutal honesty pisses off the wrong kids, and they decide to punish him for his crass and careless words by burning his face off with acid. The police question them, but they lie their way out of it. Needless to say, good old Jimmy doesn't take it too well, and his revenge is something you simply have to read to believe. This shit is fucking brutal. Number 5, Rouge. Hey, if Slendy as a character rather than a single story can make these lists, so can Rouge. A young woman damaged by a miscarriage and the death of her fiancé in an accident, Rouge withdraws from the world and begins self-harming, forcing her friends and loved ones to try to commit her. But Rouge is crafty and escapes into the woods, where Slender Man finds her and makes her his proxy. Now she guards the woods, hiding behind her hideously smiling mask, serving as a surrogate mother to the other proxies, while simultaneously acting as the hidden hunter for anyone not invited in. She stalks the treetops with the ability to perfectly imitate a coyote before mauling her victims to death with the metal claws attached to her gloves. All the proxies are awesome, or at least the 5 I consider canonical, which are Hoodie and Masky, Tiki Toby, Kate, and Rouge. But Rouge is second only to Toby in my eyes. It's odd, since she's only had one story written about her so far, Don't Look Up. But Lazy Cat Lady has provided enough information on her that I'm endlessly curious about her. I can't wait to read her origin comic, Hollow, when it finally comes out. Plus, I also love Lazy's artwork. I think that's the biggest part of the appeal for me, is that I love Rouge's design. It's very practical. The mask is really horrific. Like, you have to see that mask. It's something terrifying. And unmasked, I think she's really pretty. And the choice of clawed gloves and having her attack from above are very smart choices that help set her off from other killer characters. Number 4, Forgotten Valentine. Michael Whitehouse is the most consistently awesome pasta writer around, period. This haunting tale of a young love lost and redemption found absolutely devastates me. I'm not even going to give anything away. Just fucking read it. Number 3, It Hurts a Little. Being in a coma. It's a state we still know little to nothing about. Are you truly just a vegetable, barely breathing and maintaining a pulse and nothing else? Or are you still fully conscious, but simply unable to move or respond? I'm sure we've all thought about it, each probably with our own different answer to that question. But what if the latter is true? And what if the person is a little boy? A little boy that's there to hear the decision that will forever decide the fate of his young life. I'll admit it. The first time I read this, I fucking cried. No lie, I cried. I mean, I fucking cried. It's just not fair. Nothing about this story plays fair. Trust me, when you read this one, you need to brace yourself. It's short, but it will kick you in the nuts repeatedly. You won't come out of this one the same person you were going in. I fucking promise you that. Number 2, Milk and Cookies. The best ghost story in the creepypasta community I've read so far, beyond a shadow of a doubt. In this story, a young convenience store clerk relates her experiences with a regular customer. He's a kind, elderly man that every Friday comes in and buys a pint of milk and a package of cookies. One night, she decides to follow him and just see what's up. It's not that she's scared of the man, as he's never given her a reason to be scared, but just kind of curious why he comes in at the same time on the same day of the week and buys the same stuff. So she closes up early after he's completed the weekly transaction and follows him. She finds him in the local junkyard, sitting on the back of an old refrigerator trailer. The old man knew she was following him and invites her to sit down. He then tells the tale of how once in the 1930s, when he was still a young boy, he had been playing in the junkyard when he had gotten himself trapped in this very trailer. He wasn't sure how long he was there, but he did know that he wasn't alone. The voice of a little girl had been there with him, and they had struck up a conversation. She kept him sane while he waited, and when rescuers finally found him and got him out, she had panicked, not wanting to be alone again. He had promised her that she wouldn't be alone anymore, and that he'd come and visit her when he could. Once the rescuers had freed him, he begged them to search in there for the girl. They initially told him that there was no one else there, but he threw a tantrum until they finally relented. When they searched the trailer again, sure enough, they found the body of a little girl who couldn't have been any more than 8, 9, maybe 10 years old, badly decomposing, buried under a mound of debris in the collapsed back end of the trailer. Since then, with the exceptions of work or illness, he kept his promise and visited the trailer every Friday with milk and cookies for his friend. The protagonist is unsure what to think, but the story leaves her shaken. She and the old man part company. She's still thinking it was possible that he was just senile. But something was still odd, she thought, as she left. The door to the trailer was open, and inside was an empty pack of milk and some cookie crumbs. Okay, again, I'll admit that this story makes me cry. It's such a beautiful, subtle tale. It's somber, melancholic, elegiac, and just brilliant from top to bottom. All the characters are nice, regular folk just sharing a strange experience together. And it's not trying to be creepy. It's not trying to scare you. It's trying to tell the simple story of a boy's loss of innocence, a young woman's growing wisdom, and a lost little girl who finally finds a friend. And that ending is just the right kind of subtle that leaves you questioning what's real and what's not. I cannot recommend this one more highly. You seriously need to read this one if you call yourself a creepypasta fan. And number 1, Lister's Rouge. The best lost episode pasta you've never heard of. This one details the eccentric career of silent film director Kai Winkelmann. An early force in German cinema, most of his stuff has been lost now. An estimated 70% of all silent films are. But in his day, he was most known for the Lord Lister serials, produced by Joe May. Lord Lister, aka Raffles, is the star of a series of early pulp crime novels written by Kurt Mattal and Theo Blakenes. Theo Blakency. There we go. Lord Lister in novels is a gentleman thief in the same vein as Arsène Lupin. In Winkleman's serials, though, he is a much darker character, a criminal mastermind and terrorist more similar to Fantomas. The serials follow the exploits of Scotland Yard's Detective Baxter as he tries to find Lister and finally bring him to justice. The serials were really popular in their day, but stopped when Winkleman's main actor, Olaf Schneider, ran off to America with his wife, Greta Schultz, eventually having a little girl together. There was a huge rift between the director and star for almost a decade before they seemed to patch things up. Then suddenly, after a decade of silence and a couple of other films through his own company, Winkleman and Schneider put out one last Lister episode entitled Lister's Rouge, which translates in English to Lister's Revenge. It opens with Baxter, now a decimated booze hound, unable to cope with his continued failure to bring his great foe to justice. He leaves his home after seeming to write a suicide note, standing on the edge of a bridge when Lister approaches him. He goads him to jump, but Baxter had enough and gave chase to his masked opponent, following him into a manhole, into a cavern filled with furniture made of human bones. Eventually, he is jumped by Lister's men and brought to some kind of cave or dungeon. There, Lister confronts him and slowly psychologically tortures him, bringing him first his young daughter, who Lister calmly slashes the throat of, and then 3 weeks later, the severed head of his wife. After forcing him to kiss it, Lister then orders his men to beat Baxter with nail-studded boards. Then he orders them to stop before looking at the dying man and saying to him, "Now do you see why you could never catch me? Could never beat me?" Before turning to the camera, taking off the mask and proclaiming, "I am lost," before stretching his jaws inhumanly wide as though he was about to devour the audience, and then cutting to black. The episode was a resounding failure and quickly fell into obscurity, with test audiences so appalled by the realism of the gore effects that a warrant was issued for Winkleman. Unable to find him at his home, they eventually found his charred remains when they were called out to a fire at his film studio. The bodies of Schneider, Schultz, and their daughter were never found. This one convinced me it might have been real. It is true that around 70% of silent films are lost. In fact, a good one that's been lost is London After Midnight, which starred Lon Chaney as a detective dressed up as a vampire trying to capture a serial killer. And said vampire had teeth like a shark's, and the makeup design was one of Lon Chaney's freakiest. There's still plenty of promotional photos and shit for it out there, so you can look it up. You can see how crazy Chaney's design was, but the actual film itself is long since gone. There's, as far as I know, no one has ever found an actual viable copy of it left. And that's kind of sad, because Lon Chaney, as we all know, is fucking awesome. The man of 1,000 faces, one of the best silent film actors ever. The king of pantomime. And yeah, so with that fact, that adds some validity to it. And I even know why a lot of these films are lost. The fact is, film stock at the time was not good quality at all. And even worse, was often treated with this silver salt solution that was highly flammable. And a lot of them just ended up being lost in fires because the film burnt to a crisp as soon as it got hot. And also, another thing that lends validity to the story, movie serials were extremely popular in the silent era. A lot of them based on the popular pulp crime and adventure stories of the day. So, with all that said, I've done a little research myself. And the fact is that I just don't know. I was able to find that Lord Lister is a real character, a gentleman thief and main character to a popular pulp magazine in the 19-teens. In fact, some of the stories have already been reprinted and you can get them for your Kindle if you just look for Lord Lister. I've also learned that Joe May, the alleged producer of the serials, was in fact a real person. He was a director and producer that played a major role in both the early Austrian/German and even the Hollywood scenes. But I've been unable to uncover any evidence of a Lister serial or of Kai Winkleman. So I guess you're just going to have to read the story and decide this one for yourselves. Until next time, bye.